Hey, everybody, and welcome to another recording of the Premodern 64 deck Super Gauntlet. I'm Michael Hoyp. I'm joined once again by Bob Baker. Say hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
And today we are covering a match of the round of 32. This match is between a red green Goblins list and a green white Enchantress list. So the deck list that I have up is Goblins, and it is choosing to splash green, and those cards are only in the sideboard: Naturalize and Color the Claw and a Tranquil Domain. But in the main, it's just your pretty typical Goblins list. The one standout is there's two copies of Hearth Charm, which is a modal spell. It can destroy an artifact creature, give your creatures +1/+0, and I forget the other mode. But
Make target creature with power 2 or less unblockable.
yes, so actually all the modes can come up and could be relevant. The artifact creature one is not going to be relevant in this matchup, but I guess the blocking one is probably not very good either. But it's just a cute little tech card that has a little bit of flexibility. Other than that, everything seems like pretty standard. I guess one thing to note is there are 4 Wasteland, and then in addition there are 2 Rishadan Port, and there is a 1 Gaea's Cradle, which is something I haven't seen with as many of the Goblins lists, but I think is a pretty cool inclusion. So what do you take away from this deck list, Bob?
I mean, this guy is team good guys for sure.
Yeah.
Like, um, there's nothing I love more in the game of Magic than turning a goblin sideways.
Yeah.
So, uh, that's what I take away. I mean, we'll have to see what he's up against here. I'm not 100% familiar with this Enchantress list, so I'm
Sure.
excited to see what it is,
Yeah.
and then we'll make a determination. But it's going to be hard to have a biased opinion
Okay.
from me,
Sure.
an unbiased opinion.
All right. Well, let's jump over to the green white Enchantress deck. So, what this deck is trying to do is kind of set up a draw engine with either Argothian Enchantress or Enchantress Presence, and those both draw cards after you cast an enchantment spell. And the deck has a lot of enchantments. Um, there are Elephant's Grass, which slow down attacking creatures, Wild Growth to accelerate you. Sterling Grove is a card that can both protect your enchantments by giving them Shroud, but then also has the ability to sacrifice itself to put an enchantment on top. And then there's some utility stuff. It usually ends up winning by kind of locking your opponent out. It could do that with solitary confinement and then just drawing enough cards by chaining enchantments together and then generating a bunch of mana with Sarah's Sanctum, and then you can use something like Sacred Mesa to make a bunch of tokens. Also, it has an option of using Opalescence, which would turn all the enchantments into creatures and just kill your opponent that way. And so it's kind of a prison combo deck. It also does have the combination of Parallax Tide and Opalescence, so those two in combination, because you'd be able to remove creatures and then use the last couple of counters to remove itself, or the last counter. There's a timing thing. Basically, you can exile all your opponent's creatures indefinitely and then always have like that Parallax Tide with enough counters.
Oh, the Parallax Wave, you mean?
Parallax Wave, yes. Sorry, if I said Parallax Tide, I meant Parallax Wave. Yep. So that's a combination that's good against creature decks, and then also, I mean, with the Opalescence in play, I mean, it's a threat that kind of protects itself too. So yeah, basically, if this deck gets going, it's very, very powerful. But the question is it doesn't do a lot to resist the opponent. Against creatures, it does have the Elephant Grass, but there aren't any Swords of Plowshares in the main. There's no Hand Disruption or counter spells out of the green white deck, and so it's gonna let your opponent do things until it gets its stuff set up. So that's kind of what it's aiming to do. Do you want to add anything after you've heard about this deck or looked at any of the pieces?
No, I think some of the card choices are interesting. The split on Sterling Grove and Enlightened Tutor is interesting to me. And also, well, I mean, I guess we'll have to see. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the format, but um, this This should be an interesting one. Assuming he can get his hands on, an Elephant Grass Solitary Confinement, something like that,
Hmm.
he can buy a lot of time. And then I think once you get to the point where your engine is churning, it's gonna be pretty hard for him to lose. And even like something like a Sacred Mesa into just like a handful of mana, which is pretty easy with Sarah Sanctum.
Hmm.
Uh, it could be something that could buy him enough time to go off. So, um, you know, we'll see what kind of draws these players have, and but it's definitely gonna be exciting to watch some goblins get in there.
Yeah. All right. So we have our match ready, and we'll start it off. Felix on our left, he's the Goblins player. He has kept his hand, and Ron has mulliganed to 6. So Ron is the Enchantress player. He's on the right.
Okay.
So a lot of times, whenever we talk about goblins, the thing that it comes down to, but games are drastically different if you have a turn 1 Goblin Lackey versus the games that you don't. That card is just extremely powerful out of the Goblin deck. So we'll see if that is an opening that Felix has. We see Ron starts with the Forest and the Wild Growth. So if he has another land, then he'll have access at least to 3 mana on his second turn.
We got a fetch land down to 19. So we're going to see a mountain here. And then, a Lackey is going to be very powerful in this matchup because it doesn't look like, especially before they sideboard, that Ron has a lot to do to contest the Lackey. A Lackey that gets played on turn 1.
Yep.
He has interesting cut. Okay. I was a little confused about what was happening there, but he's letting him cut. But we do have the turn 1 Lackey.
Okay.
He's got a few enchantresses to block with. Though I don't think you really want to be blocking with your Argothian Enchantress. Is it an 0-1 or an 0-2?
It's an 0-1, right? 0-1, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think you really want to be blocking with your Argothian Enchantress. But you could. And maybe an Elephant Grass. Although
the Elephant Grass will slow your opponent down a little bit, but it's still not going to prevent your opponent from attacking with the Lackey unless they only have 1 land.
Does this looks like an Enchantress's presence?
Yes. Yep. So that's kind of like step 1 of what the deck is trying to do is set up its draw engine. So
yeah.
But in the face of a Lackey, it still could be problematic because the most potent thing to put down typically is a Siege Gang Commander. But one thing to note is Felix only has 2 copies of Siege Gang Commander in this list, so I guess it might be a little less likely, but still, even connecting with a Goblin Ringleader or a Goblin Matron can be really powerful. Okay, so he does...
Looks like a Matron?
Yes.
Alright. So what do you search up here if you're...
I think... it might depend a little bit on the rest of your hand, but so some cards you could see is if you could
Skirk
get a
Prospector could be a good grab here. You could get the Siege Gang Commander if he doesn't already have it. Yeah,
you could get a Siege Gang Commander for the next turn. You could get a Piledriver because that's a card that you can cast. There really aren't that many other 2s. So other than that, maybe Ringleader is another option.
You could just get a Warchief, honestly.
Yeah. The thing is, I feel like if you're going to try and, I guess if you have multiple lands, then you could just play the Warchief on the next turn. I'm thinking it's not the Warchief's fine to put into play with Lackey, but I think if you're looking to get a card that you're putting into play with Lackey, I think you just go for Siege Gang Commander.
Yeah. And I guess Warchief's not even that good to play next turn. It is what he's getting. But even if, say he has the 2 lands in his hand, even if he casts it before he attacks, it's not like... Warchief's not like the other lords that actually pumps your team. So he makes your dudes cheaper and he gives them haste. So not a super... not a super impactful turn 3 play on its own.
Sure. Yeah, it just because basically you have the mana reduction in the form of Goblin Lackey, and it's going to stick around against this deck list. But it's all contextual depending on what's in your hand that what you're going to get.
Yeah, this will set him up for a really powerful turn 4. But his turn 3 looks like it's probably just going to be attack for 2. Now, granted, he gets to put another thing into play with the Lackey, and he'll get to start his turn 4 with a Goblin Ringleader in play, plus whatever he put into play with the Lackey. which is definitely a very powerful board position, and I think probably a winning board position in most cases.
Okay. So he does have a Goblin Piledriver.
Okay, then that makes the haste on the Warchief a lot better, right? Because now he's attacking for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, the window is closing quickly for Ron.
Yeah. So and it usually takes like a few turns for him to set up in terms of getting enough enchantments or Argothian Enchantress or Enchantress's presence into play before you can kind of start churning through your deck, playing a bunch of enchantments and chaining those together.
Okay, so Lotus Petal into Argothian Enchantress.
Yep.
And I assume we're going to see some sort of enchantment here, so we can draw a couple cards. Now, I don't know of any way off the top of my head that Felix could kill Ron next turn. So I don't think Felix has to worry about winning right now. Or Ron has to worry about winning right now, but he needs to be in a position where he can finish the game out after he takes this big attack from Felix. Sylvan Library.
Sylvan Library, yep. So
that seems a little rough to me, but he would, I think, be hoping to put something on the board that would be a little more impactful. But I guess that'll give him a better chance to have a good turn next turn. But
yeah,
I suppose he'll have enough life left over at the end of this turn to pay to draw one extra card too.
That's definitely a possibility too.
So he's going to take 11 here, so he'll be at 8. He can't buy, he can't buy 2 cards, but he can buy 1.
Yes. So what Ron basically needs at this point, because Elephant Grass might not be enough at this point, because if Felix just has...
And Elephant Grass just keeps it from untapping, right?
No, you have to... Black creatures can't attack, and non-black creatures you have to pay 2 additional to attack with. So
gotcha.
If Felix had 4 mana, they'd be able to attack with Warchief and Piledriver, or maybe he could attack with Lackey too. But the maximum amount of damage he could do is 1, 2, 3, 5 with 4 mana.
So he can definitely buy himself an extra turn with an Elephant Grass here.
Yeah. But the card that he's really looking for is...
What did he put into play with the Lackey? It looks like he didn't put anything into play.
Oh. Okay. My screen kind of...
So does that mean that Felix has no other goblins in hand?
Or maybe nothing he wants to commit. I guess there's no real reason why he wouldn't. I don't think there's any thing that could punish him for putting stuff into play.
I mean, like a Parallax Wave, but the Parallax Wave is capped on the amount of creatures it can kill anyways, right? So...
That's true. But the card that I think Ron wants the most is Solitary Confinement. Especially because there's nothing Felix can do in the main.
Mm-hmm.
As long as he's able to parlay enough enchantments together, because he does skip his draw step, but if he had... Now he has 3 enchantment drawing engines that basically every 1 enchantment would net him 2 cards, and eventually he's going to find a Sacred Mesa and be able to outpace anything that Felix could do. I guess the thing is like Felix has Goblin Sharpshooter in his deck, and
so he can't set
I guess
recall?
so. Well, I was to say yes. So he casts Exploration to draw 3 cards. I guess if Felix had the Goblin Sharpshooter, then Ron would just eventually find Opalescence and Parallax Wave. So I guess that one. I was thinking that maybe Felix would have a foil to Ron's win condition, but if Ron has access to his entire deck, he would be able to prevent that.
Sure.
Okay.
Now, on Felix's side of the board, I have to say, if you're going to play a Goblin deck, you got to play the Goblin Mountain. So these guys got to up their land game.
I don't know.
And all the commentary that I've done so far, everybody
You're
That's
hating
just
on 7th edition foil mountain. Those are
look. I'm not saying it's a bad mountain. I'm saying that if you're gonna play a goblin deck, you gotta play the goblin mountain.
right. I don't know if
I
I can
think
bring here. I don't know if this is a
you
card
gotta bring it
fetcher.
up in the card viewer
I don't
so
know.
people know.
I don't have the ability to be that specific with my arts, but oh, that's the one that came
Ooh,
up. There
there
you
it
go.
is.
There you go.
Yeah, whoever made this card fetcher knows what's up about mountains.
It might just be like the numerically first Mirage Mountain is what happened. Anyways, a solitary confinement is the card that came down. So that was the one that we were talking about. Is the most powerful game one play that Ron can have, and especially with this draw engine already, he has 3 enchantments. So while theoretically possible for him to
You'd have to
not,
whiff
yes,
really hard between Sylvan Library and 3 copies of the Enchantress effect in play. There'd have to be a lot of land in a row on top of, or not even that, but there'd have to be a lot of land in a row on top of Ron's deck
yeah, a lot
for him to
of
lose this game.
basically a lot of non-enchantments. So at that point, Felix had just asked how many cards were in Ron's hand. He had 5, and he's willing to concede.
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump over and look at the sideboards of these decks. Well, so the Goblins deck in game 1, it doesn't have any of the sideboard. It doesn't have any of the green cards in the main. So those are all in the sideboard, and the Naturalize effects and Tranquil Domain are definitely great cards in this matchup. So
yeah,
I would expect Hearth Charm to come out. Goblin Tinkerer, I think there's a copy of. So that's 3 cards, because he probably wants to bring in
Mogg Fanatic's probably not great in this matchup.
5, sure.
Enchantress has Shroud, so
Yep.
you can't Fanatic it down.
Yeah, so I think Hearth Charm is 2 cards and the Goblin Tinkerer are worse. So those 3 cards, then I guess you could just take out something like 2 Mogg Fanatics and then bring in those 4 Naturalize and a Tranquil Domain. I'm trying to think. I mean, Tormod's Crypt doesn't do anything. Obviously, the Forest comes in, but I would just either put that in replacement of
it's going to swap out for
a Rishadan Port or a Mountain. Yeah. Goblin King, I don't think is really doing anything. Oh, you could take out a Gempalm Incinerator. Maybe that might be worse than a Mogg Fanatic. But it also does draw a card at some point. But,
yeah, it cycles for a card, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of splitting hairs at that point. So let's just move over to the Enchantress deck. So having Swords of Plowshares, there's 3 copies of those in the sideboard. We did talk about how important Lackey is, so I think those will come in.
For sure.
The Circle of Protection Red could come in. It's not a card I'm really that excited about against goblins, because there's usually just so many different red sources of damage that it's so mana intensive, and especially because you don't do anything to prevent them from flooding the board really. Like, I guess you have your Parallax Wave, but I don't think that really prevents them. So I mean, maybe it comes in, and then kind of going like with Warmth. Yeah, Warmth is a card that you're playing against a red deck, but I don't think that's the fight you want to be fighting really. Like, you can gain some life, but if you're not affecting the board or like locking them out, that goblins can just deal a huge chunk of damage.
I gotta look up what Warmth does. Hold on.
Whenever a player plays a red spell, you gain 2 life. So.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's probably not a race that you're gonna win, even if you get it out pretty early.
I guess you can look at what cards do I want to take out. Like Seal of Cleansing, I don't think has any legitimate targets like in the main or the sideboard. So there's 2 of those in the main. Those can come out. Tasabo's Web does do something, but it's not at its best. I guess there's 4. It's the 4 Wastelands and the 2 Rishadan Port. But so maybe that could stay in. I'm just trying to think of cards that are less impactful.
I think if I'm Ron here, the cards that I really want are going to be the Swords and the Solitary Confinement. The cards that I don't think really do anything or do a lot in his main deck, Seal of Cleansing and Sabo's Web. You still got to make one more cut of something else. I think probably Sterling Grove would be a reasonable cut. Or I like the Enlightened Tutor. Maybe that's wrong, but you could probably cut what do you call it? The name of the card is the Sacred Mesa. No, yeah,
Sacred Mesa.
Yeah, or Miri's Guile is like another one that's like doesn't do a lot. Um,
Yeah, also
yeah,
like yeah, so it's just kind of what he wants to trim and figure out. So let's go back over to the match and we'll figure out a few of the things that they sideboarded. So at this point, um Felix has
Mulligan.
mulligan to 6. Uh so let me
Well,
reset the life totals.
well, let's see if he got another turn one Lackey. It wasn't good enough in the first game, but let's see if it's good enough in the second game here.
Yeah. I mean the difference between this game is like even if
I mean, being on
Ron
the play is a huge deal.
That's true too. But even if Ron does have certain enchantments, he's not just cold with them. He has
Yes,
outs in his deck, so
yes.
that's a much better feeling.
One Tranquil Domain at the right time could really turn this game around.
Yeah, it's definitely a card that I have played in the past. Andrew Walker is uh, someone who is known for playing enchantments, and back when I first started, the events we played in were a lot smaller, and so I pretty much always had some form of Tranquil Domain in my sideboard because I was just pretty likely to play against Andrew. So
All right, so last time he did this, he went and searched up a Goblin Warchief. Let's see if he learned anything new and then decides to get something different here.
I mean, I feel like I just want Siege King Commander, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Season Commander would be like my pick, but maybe Felix knows something that we don't know.
I mean, he knows the cards in his hand, so that is something.
Yeah, I mean that's I'm giving him credit, but I think CJ Commander, I think it's pretty reasonable, even knowing like how Ron could possibly sideboard here. There's not a whole lot that Ron can do on his turn that will stop Felix from connecting with that lackey.
Mhm.
So I think this is just an opportunity to say I'm going to put this whatever into play next turn, and I think there's not really a situation where CGA and Commander isn't going to be the highest impact card.
Yeah,
I guess there are situations like that exist out there, but I think on average it's going to be hard to be more impactful to the board than CGA and Commander.
yeah. I mean, like if I mean the only card I can think of that really does much. I mean, obviously if there's a swords, but I don't imagine there's a swords because the swords would have been used. Elephant Grass probably would have been played. Maybe not. Maybe not in that spot. I don't know because it does have cumulative upkeep. But um, uh, yeah. So there's not really much that Rock can do to prevent Felix from further developing. So
Got a windswept heath here from Ron. And we'll see how he can follow it up. Now his best play here, probably an Enchantress. Um, it looks like he's going to throw down an Elephant Grass.
all right.
I I don't know how I feel about that. The the amount of damage, like the Elephant Grass, is not going to stop that Goblin Lackey from getting in,
Yeah.
and he's going to have to pay upkeep on it.
Mm-hmm.
So if he decides he's not going to pay the upkeep on it, then what he did was gain 2 life, which I
Yeah.
don't think is a good use of a mana in a card. Whereas if he had waited until after the Siege Gang was in play, and to get a few more turns out of it, I think that's going to be a lot more impactful.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
Also, I don't. I mean, like, I don't know if he gave up on the opportunity of playing like something like an Argothian Enchantress, but if you're able to play the Elephant Grass after that, then you're able to cycle it. I mean, you get the
yeah.
card right away. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, this Elephant Grass is not at its best.
No, I mean, if he has no other plays this turn, I guess that's like reasonable. I mean, maybe he's thinking like, 2 life is 2 life, and I'm not going to have a better spot to put this Elephant Grass into play. Uh, but I do think that like some of his best ways to like prolong the game involve turning these cheap 1 mana enchantments into lots of cards with enchantress effects. Um, So the opportunity cost of losing that kind of an effect from your hand, I think, is pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I said, we can't see what's in their hands, so maybe he knows something that we don't.
Mhm. All right. So Felix has the ability to attack with one goblin. Which one is he going to pick? Oh.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
He picked up the Goblin Matron first. So like that is not
Yeah.
that was not the goblin I would pick.
So this reads to me like Ron has a swords in his hand.
I mean, he would have to have drawn it because he would unless he didn't have white mana the turn before. Like
He
you
did. He
def
played a forest on the first turn.
yeah. I
So
mean, like you definitely would have swords the Goblin Lackey. So I don't know.
So I guess he doesn't have the swords. I can't imagine that we're going to get anything other than the Siege Gang Commander in play.
Yep. And there we see him.
Felix superficially shrinking his field of play for some unknown reason.
What happened?
Just move the die like 2 inches.
Oh, okay.
So he's paying for the. Okay. So what does that mean? Like, he didn't have a good 2 mana play last turn. So does that mean he's not going to have a good 2 mana play this turn? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I have to agree with you that it is telling that if he didn't really do that much on his last turn, I mean, the only thing it changes is the card that he just drew, right?
yeah. Well, I will say also that, like, at this point, like, the Lackey has done the damage that the Lackey is going to do.
Sure.
He just passes the turn. Doesn't even have a land. So, like, riding this Elephant Grass out for as long as possible makes sense to me at this point once you've committed to this line. Because, Lackey's putting more material onto the board. It's still only chipping in for a couple points of damage, right? I mean, he's still at 17. And you have the ability to stall the game out quite a lot from Ron's side of the board.
Yeah.
Now, that stalling out is not nearly as safe as it was in the first game.
Well, and that like the biggest hindrance is like not only you're kind of stalling, but you have to use your mana, and he's not going to be able to set up any board state where that can really get him out of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the writing at this point has to be on the wall. Oh, that's a ringleader? Okay, well, Felix gets to play his own Ancestral Recall.
Okay.
And this one's a 2/2 with haste. So
a Fanatic and a Skirk Prospector. So only a Divination.
Well, you also got a 2/2.
Sure.
A 2/2 in play is worth a card.
Most of the time, yeah. All right. So Felix is able to add the Skirk Prospector and the Mogg Fanatic that he just drew. Or just drew off the Ringleader. So at this point, Ron is letting the Elephant Grass go.
Okay. I mean, I think Ron's dead. I'm having a hard time envisioning a line.
Oh, there's another one. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to, if that's going to be your play, why not just pay the 2 mana?
I guess if there's something that he's hoping, like if you have like an Enchantress's presence in your hand and you're hoping to draw a land, I think maybe that's what you're like hoping.
Yeah, but if you have Enchantress presence in your hand and you let it die and then you play a land and play the presence, you're just going to die.
Would you die?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
do you die this attack?
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Probably. There's a Skirk Prospector
13,
and a Siege King. Then
13, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're for sure dead between the Prospector, the Mogg Fanatics, and the Siege Gang Commander. So like,
yeah. I mean, I mean, I don't
I
know.
think you had to pay there to like let it ride out. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think anything
But
changes. I
yeah,
mean, I don't see how you're getting out of this situation.
yeah. I mean, this is a tough spot, but I think like he definitely, I think, lost a turn of like it's not like Felix has anything in his hand at this point, right? Like all the cards are on the table. I guess he does. He does technically have a single card in his hand,
Hmm.
but like Felix not going to get any like any closer to winning the game. You know what I mean? Like he's there. So and he obviously doesn't have the naturalize in his hand, or he would just naturalize the elephant grass and kill you. Um, so if your only out here is to draw as many cards off the top of your deck as possible to get to your lands to start like hitting those drops, I mean, paying to your second mana for that elephant grass there, especially if you have a card like Enchantress in your deck in your hand, like Argothian Enchantress specifically, means like you're a land away from playing Enchantress and then playing that second Elephant Grass.
Okay, yeah, I guess I have to agree. Yeah, I don't see any real downside of. I guess I don't can't think of any reason of why he could sacrifice the elephant grass and get ahead because he's just gonna die otherwise.
It feels like one of those moments where, um, and I'm guilty of this too. Back when I used to play a lot, you get to a spot where you feel like you're like gonna lose the game, so you just start like getting real sloppy and not really like fully thinking about
What
where
your
your line is.
your
Yeah, like
actual
what
outs
what
are?
line you're
Yeah,
supposed to be on.
yeah. I mean, because like in the spot, like Ron is like very minimal percent chance to win, but
Yeah, like
uh,
the difference between the play Ron made and the play that we're talking about making in like Ron's like even if it doubles his chance to win the game, we're talking about a change from like 1% to 2% or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Unless there's some card that we're missing, but I can't think of anything right now.
so it looks like Felix is trying to decide. Okay, so Felix has paid 6 mana to attack with the Warchief, the Ringleader, and the Goblin Lackey. He did that by tapping all of his lands and sacking a token with Skirk Prospector. Um,
So
Seems like the obvious attack to me.
yeah,
Uh,
he's attacking for 5. Okay.
puts him down to 11, 2, 4, 6, 8. I mean, like, this does, I think, put Ron pretty close to dead. I mean, there's another siege game. Yeah, this puts Ron dead next when Felix untaps, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Yeah, because
I,
if
I,
he's able to use his mana, is he able to kill him right now?
he's at 11, so he has to sack 5 creatures. 1, 2, 3. No, he can't kill him now.
Do the Mogg
But,
Fanatics change that math?
oh, so he's at 9. So then he only has to sack.
He still has to
He
sack.
said stack 5, yeah, so no, he can't kill him now. He's he's just a little short, but he'll be able to untap and kill him.
Yeah.
So, um, Ron's only yeah, and all it does is like prolong the game. I was gonna say Ron can play solitary confinement, but that doesn't stop him from losing.
Yeah, if he would need to have like solitary confinement into like an Argothian Enchantress or Enchantress Presence, and then like start chaining enchantments because you skip your draw step when the solitary
Yeah,
confinement's in place, so it's hard to progress your board state after
I
that.
I find it hard to believe that Ron has that particular line of play available to him, given the way that he played the last 2 turns.
Okay,
Right?
so Ron has fetched with a Windswept Heath, and now Felix is responding.
Oh, this puts him to 8, and that means Felix can actually kill him.
Uh, so it goes to 6. 2 more mana. Throws a lackey. He goes to 4.
Oh, he's 1 goblin short.
Yeah. 2 mana, flings a Siege Gang. So he's putting him to do. I think that he has.
Not a real reason to do it there instead of just waiting, but I think it accomplishes the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he thought he had him. I think maybe he miscounted.
I mean, I miscounted, so I can't blame him.
Yeah.
If he had not sacrificed one of his goblins to attack, no, because then he would be at 2 more life, anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the players are gonna confirm. Okay, so he's letting the Windswept Heath resolve. So Ron will get to play whatever he intended.
So, I mean, like, Ron could play Solitary Confinement here to not die. But his hand has to contain some Enchantress effect and some other enchantment for him to be able to not lose this game from that position.
Yeah.
Now, he's been missing land drops, so his hand is pretty full, so it's conceivable that he has those things in his hand. But even if he were to draw Solitary Confinement, the top of Felix's deck could be one of his several enchantment removals.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would just see game 3. But I can't think of any other. Well, actually, the way that Felix did this, Ron could also have drawn a Swords to Plowshares. So there's a Solitary Confinement.
Okay.
Right, but because Felix did this way instead of untapping and doing it all on his turn, a Swords on that last Siege commander there would have actually bought Felix another turn.
Yes. But then he wouldn't have like the solitary confinement.
Okay, I'm not sure what they're talking about.
They're checking math, so I'm gonna skip ahead till they resolve it. They checked the tape and wanted to make sure that Felix did his math right. So, all right. So now we're back. Felix had confirmed that he miscounted, and that Ron, basically that the situation that the way it happened was actually what it was supposed to be. That Felix was thinking in his mind that he had an extra mana or had extra damage or something, and had Ron dead. So that was, I think, part of the reason why he did all the actions in response to him fetching. So here's just a little more confirmation. But like from the spot, like Ron still is. It's not like he's in the clear. He has a solitary confinement in play, which is keeping him alive. But he's still got to do a lot of things to keep that solitary confinement in play.
Well, I mean, I have to believe if I'm Ron, I'm not just going to play the solitary confinement that I know I can't get out from underneath, right?
Well, I mean, what's your option? Just like,
well, I mean,
like pass a turn and be like dead on board.
Yeah, what I'm saying is like if your hand can't get out from underneath the solitary confinement, then you're just dead on board.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of hands that like theoretically is possible, but some of them you might have to be pretty lucky.
Yeah, I'm not saying that he has a good shot. I'm saying like I have to believe that Ron has in his hand cards that make it possible to get out from underneath the solitary confinement.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. He discards a replenish.
Yeah.
To pay for the solitary confinement. And so now we see an Enchantress present. So
okay. So he's gonna have to string some together here, and again, he's always just dead to any Naturalize effect off the top from Felix, but he has somewhat stabilized, and he has 3 or 4 cards in his hand, so 3 it looks like.
Yeah.
So it won't be that hard for him to break here, but he definitely has the ability to get out from under this.
Yeah. One other thing to note is Felix does have a Wasteland in play, and a lot of times the Enchantress deck does get a bunch of enchantments and then has a Serra Sanctum, but he's only going to get one activation of it because Felix doesn't really need his mana, so he'd be able to take out any Serra Sanctums that Ron plays.
It looks like he discards another Solitary Confinement.
Okay.
It's interesting to note that because there would be a moment in time where, okay, so Sterling Grove, draw a card, and also you can fetch up another enchantment.
Yep, this also prevents the outs of Naturalize right now, because with the Sterling Grove in play, it gives your other enchantment Shroud, so he's not able to target the Solitary Confinement. So that's definitely a very good card to have in play.
Yeah.
And so, so the Sterling Grove is like if you are in a situation where you, I guess it's hard when you only have one of the enchantment drawers in play. Like if you have multiple, you can start drawing the cards, and then on the last trigger, if you haven't drawn an enchantment, then you can sacrifice a Sterling Grove and go put an enchantment on top to hopefully that one draw into more.
Yeah, but it's possible that if you're Ron here, he has 3 cards in his hand. I think it's possible that his best play might be to sack that Sterling Grove to go get a second Enchantress's Presence.
Yeah.
And it puts some shields down for some amount of time, which puts him dead to a Naturalize. But I do think that it does give him the best out to get out from under his Solitary Confinement and get back into this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to start drawing multiple cards, because otherwise, if you just have one Enchantress's Presence in play, then you're never gaining ground.
Okay. Ron does not agree with me.
Yeah, I think I agree with you too. I think I would want, unless you have. Okay. So he's got one in his hand. So, all right. Yeah. So this situation looks decent. I mean, for Ron.
As long as one of those 2 cards he's holding is an enchantment, I think he's in a good spot.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, if they're not, then he can't do anything, right?
Well, he has the Sterling Grove, so he can untap.
Well, he never draws a card.
Oh, yeah.
He skips his draw step because of Solitary Confinement.
Fair enough. This Enchantress deck is pretty interesting. Solitary Confinement is an interesting Magic card.
Yeah, it's kind of scary though when you play it, because it's like you're putting all your eggs in this one basket, and it's like, all right, hopefully this stays here and it doesn't break, because I'm gonna die if it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so
pitches. I mean, we almost drew a card. Is this a third Presence? Okay.
All right.
That's good for 2.
Yeah, he discarded a Sylvan Library, and then he gets to draw 2 cards. So what is...
one of them's got to be an enchantment, and he's still in the game.
What is the interaction between Sylvan Library and Solitary Confinement? I think...
I don't know. I'd have to see the...
So Sylvan Library, I think it's only during your draw step. So, okay, you would not be able to use the ability because with Solitary Confinement in play.
Okay, sure.
I wasn't sure if there was like a weird loophole that you'd still be able to do it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'd have to see the...
The
Gather.
So Ron flips over his hand. He had 2 lands in hand. So he drew 2 off the Enchantress Presence. So there wasn't anything he could do there.
Yeah, I still think if he had let that first Elfin Grass run its course before binning it, he would have had one more draw step before he had to play the Solitary Confinement, I think. I mean, I'd have to go back and double check everything, but I think he would have either had one more draw step before he had to play the Solitary Confinement, or been able to hold on to a 1-mana enchantment for after he got his first Enchantress's presence into play.
Okay, I don't think anything changes for sideboarding for the Goblins deck. Do you think anything changes? Have we learned anything that the way the game played is? Does anything seem more valuable in the sideboard that maybe we overlooked?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Um,
All right, then let's go down for our third game. So this will be the decider to see who moves on. And in this game, Felix has mulligan to 6.
all right, we had mulligans in all 3 games.
Okay.
It makes sense that Felix would be kind of an aggressive mulligan on aggressive mulligans because his best play is a turn 1 Lackey. So if you don't have a turn 1 Lackey, I think you got to have some kind of way to deal with all the enchantments. So I think there are a lot of 7-card hands from Felix that I would be willing. That would be probably look like very keepable hands that I would be willing to pitch back in this specific matchup.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so Forest is what Ron fetches with his Windswept Heath.
Yeah. Given that he's actually fetching here, I have to assume he has probably Exploration. There's no reason to just like...
Could be Mirror's Guile. Oh, or Wild Growth.
Wild Growth. Okay. Sure, I forgot about Wild Growth. Okay. I was going to say, I don't think he's just going to dunk an Elfin Grass onto an empty board. So
no. All right, a Skirk Prospector is the play. That one's a little less intimidating.
I still think it's a very good card. Like, Skirk Prospector carries its weight.
Yeah, I agree. I love the card. But when you're being compared to Goblin Lackey, I mean, like, it's pretty high bar.
For sure.
All right, so Sylvan Library.
And definitely in the wheelhouse of 6-card hands that I'm willing to keep are hands that include Skirk Prospector and a Goblin Warchief.
So one thing to note is Ron did not have a second land. He was able to deploy the Sylvan Library thanks to the Wild Growth on the Forest, but I think he's looking on that Sylvan Library for him to find more mana sources. I mean, I guess the only other consideration is like there's a possibility he has a Serra Sanctum in his hand and he's trying to play around Wasteland, but I don't think that's very likely.
So I've noticed in my... Okay, must have just drawn that Lackey off the top.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, he's gonna... Okay. That's a really strong play because this port's gonna lock out Ron out of all of his mana, given that he didn't have a second land here. Yeah. Although with a library in play, he should be able to find. He should have a better chance of finding the land, I should say.
Yeah, but like the likelihood that you're gonna do a bunch with only 1 mana is not that high.
Yeah, but also like it really sucks when you look at those 3 cards and none of them are lands. Yes. But this port's going to be a problem. But he has a lot of cheap interactive cards. Well, interactive air quotes, because Elfin Grass not that interactive. But he does also have Swords of the Plowshares, things like that, which I think. Oh yeah, see, so.
All right, he's got a Forest and another Wild Growth, so
that's pretty good.
Yeah,
right. That's exactly what he needs to kind of get out of a situation like this.
Yeah.
Oh, he paid 4.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, he did draw an extra card. Yeah.
I was wondering where the 4 damage came from, but it's right there.
They're confirming life totals. Felix is still at 20.
Yeah. So, as I've been watching and getting more into this pre-modern format, I've noticed that a lot of the Goblin decks tend to splash green.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, okay, well, here we got the Lackey into the Siege Gang for a 3rd game in a row. Well, I guess he didn't play it in the first game, but for the 2nd game in a row. A turn slower this time than before, but still a potent threat, even on a board like this, especially when your mana's under attack.
Is it
by Rishadan Port.
Is it coming down a turn slower? Because the first one it was It, he had to get the matron first, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah. So he just
same.
had a turn 3 season commander 2 games
Yeah,
in a row.
but
Um, but yeah, I was saying they all seem to splash green, whereas traditionally, or I guess I shouldn't say traditionally, but like originally the Goblin decks like in Onslaught Block and that around that era all played black, and I
yep.
was wondering if you had any insight as to why green is the color of choice instead of black.
Well, for this Gauntlet, there were both versions. There was a black
Okay.
version in the Gauntlet as well. In terms of metagame, I think it's just like a preference. I think it depends on what you're expecting playing. I think one of the bigger pushes to green was Phyrexian Dreadnought was more of a player, and Duress isn't as. I mean, it's okay at breaking up that combo, but like once it's in play, I think the Naturalize is a little more reactive. They're both reasonable, and I think it's just a metagame choice.
Are
But
there not like, I mean, if Dreadnought specifically is the card that you're worried about, like, can't you play like Smother and stuff? Does
yeah,
Smother
but
not?
the thing is like if you're covering the weaknesses of goblins, like with your sideboard cards,
Mhm.
like Naturalize is a better effect because there are cards like
Okay,
Engineered Plagues or um,
sure.
the Circle of Protection Reds that might come in down. So enchantments are a little just more difficult to deal with for against the goblins, and I think that those cards uh, kind of fight hate cards that you'll see from multiple matchups.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense to me. All right, cool. I was just trying to get some insight into the
Yeah.
deck choices. Interesting to see that there were both versions of goblins in the gauntlet. How well did the other one do? Did it like?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I I know just in general that when people looked at the matchups and people were making predictions because there was like a bracket like March Madness kind of thing.
Hmm.
A lot of the picks that on paper everyone thought, okay, these are the more powerful decks, or even this is a good matchup on paper. There were a lot of upsets. So
Okay.
even if like the Black Red Goblin deck might have had a good matchup in paper or um, is powerful, which it is, it definitely is. I think it might have been knocked out earlier than others might have thought. So,
Okay. So in all that time, all that's happened so far is we had Felix pass the turn and tap down one of these wild growth forests,
yeah,
and it looks like Ron is trying to decide how to resolve the Sylvan Library activation
yeah,
here.
which is pretty tricky because I mean, um, deciding whether you want to pay life or not can really impact the game. Like this game is if Ron is gonna like take over, he doesn't have that many more turns.
Yeah,
Um,
this is going to be a tight one for sure. Um,
so whose position do you like right now?
I mean, like, if I had to pick one of these people to win this game, I think like I'm going to jump on Felix side of the table
Sure.
from this position. Like
Oh.
the
Do you think
one
do you think
way
if
ahead on board.
Felix do you
Oh,
think
go ahead.
Felix didn't have the Russian import, would you still be as confident?
No, the Rishadan Port I think is winning this game right
Okay.
now. Like,
Okay.
I mean, like, but one like Felix is way ahead on board. He just like so much more material in play. He has like two of his best cards on the table. He
Mhm.
has a way to pressure his opponent's mana development, which is really important here because every card matters for Ron like a huge deal because he's got to be able to play a lot of cards in a single turn to win the game. So getting choked down, getting half your mana cut down from Felix's side of the board is like a huge deal. Um, plus, like, and maybe this doesn't matter because of like the way in which these games are played, sort of like spread out. But the amount of like mental energy it takes to like make the correct play from Ron's side of the board as this game goes on is going to be way more than it is on Felix's side. So there's just like from a human perspective, there's just way more opportunity to make a mistake that could cost you the game in a game that's going to be, like if Ron wins this, it's going to be a close game. He's
Sure.
gonna he's gonna pull this out at a very low life total, um, and like just the opportunity to get tired and have a brain fart, which is something that's happened to me a million billion times playing Magic. Like it's just like so high. So like if I had to like take over for one of these two guys, I would jump onto that Goblin player side of the table so fast.
Sure. One thing that I think I was just watching some old Pro Tour coverage recently, and I always associate like decks that are more complicated are more powerful, and that's not actually necessarily like a one-to-one correlation. It's not like making
Yeah.
your deck more complicated, giving you more decisions inherently makes your deck more powerful. It's not. So it's just like it. I mean, just having a Goblin Lackey, yeah, it's just the easy button, and like sometimes that's
Yeah.
the way to do it. And, like it's not like Ron he doesn't gain any real advantage by having like Sylvan library triggers and like things that like you having options and whatnot. Like you still have to make all the right plays. So it's something that in terms of like when you're picking a deck, I feel like a lot of times I fall in the trap like, oh, I should pick this more complicated deck because I'm able to play it. It has more play to it, and I can win more. And that's not necessarily the case. Like just because it has more options doesn't necessarily mean more power. Just pick the most powerful deck.
For sure. So Ron decided not to pay any life and did play an Argothian Enchantress there. So that's pretty good for him.
Yep.
He's still like, this is still a pretty hard clock. So we're gonna see him take, what is this, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage. Plus we're gonna see another Lackey activation. So he's down to 8. And what's the scariest card Felix could put into play here? Honestly, like,
Skirk Prospector?
no, I think probably just another. Yeah, maybe a Prospector, but maybe also just like another Siege Gang Commander.
He doesn't have anything, right? Because he just played a land.
Yeah, okay, so he has no goblins in his hand. So I have to imagine that he probably, well, he just tapped his green source, so he doesn't have a disenchant effect either. So no goblins and no disenchants.
Yeah, I wonder why you wouldn't leave that one up.
So that's got to put him on 3 lands, right? If you don't have a goblin and you don't have a disenchant, the only other thing you could have is a land. There are no non-disenchant, non-goblin cards in this deck at this point, right?
I think you're right. Goblin Pyromancer.
Okay.
So, I found one. That
would be a one that he would choose not to put in play also. Okay.
I hope he reveals his hand at the end, and that's in his hand.
Well, if it's in his hand, well...
I guess, wait, if he had it, then if he would have played that last turn...
6, 8, 10. Yeah, if he had...
He would have killed... Yeah, he would have... Yeah. If he would have killed Ron, he wouldn't have killed himself.
Yeah, he killed Ron, sorry. Yeah, so it can't be Goblin Pyromancer.
Alright, never mind.
And if it was a Siege Gang Commander, he would have put it into play. And if it was a Goblin Ringleader, he would have put it into play. So I think he has 3 lands in his hand.
It looks like Ron, with his hand face up, I think he's conceding. So let me switch over. I think they're going to talk about what they had and what was their sideboarding process. Because we see Ron is showing his hand had a Replenish, Enchantress's Presence, 2 Enchantress's Presence, Warmth, Sterling Grove, and another Replenish and Enlightened Tutor. So he had a lot of... Obviously, he was short on mana, so he had a bunch of stuff. I didn't see what...
Oh, he didn't have any white mana.
Yeah.
That's a bummer. If he had white mana there, he could have upkeeped his way with a Enlightened Tutor to some kind of a... Some kind of something, but he didn't have any white mana.
Sure.
So that's rough. Yeah. Did we get to see Ron's hand? Was it 3 lands?
Oh, you mean Felix?
Felix hand? Dang it.
Yeah. No, I didn't see it, no.
Okay.
But yeah, he was just talking about how he drew the Lackey. That's why he led with the Skirk Prospector, so...
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Alright. I think we'll just stick around for a bit to see how they sideboarded. I think they're going to display that. And then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a matchup I feel like is pretty close either way. I mean, the green splash definitely is better against the enchantments than I think the black splash. Because the black, you have to deal with the enchantments preemptively. The green one can be a lot more reactive.
Yeah, I mean, I will also say that, like, and I'm not sure how often this happens, but you definitely get to, like, your win percentage definitely goes way, way, way up if you always have turn 1 Goblin Lackey.
Oh, yeah.
So, Felix had a Goblin Lackey on turn 1 or turn 2 in all 3 games, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean that's like the Goblins deck is just so powerful because
So interesting. He took out 2 Ringleaders.
I think the thought is that the games don't grind, or he doesn't usually get creatures killed. But I guess we only saw 5 cards that we were interested in bringing in. I guess maybe he brought in like Tormod's Crypt against Replenish, but or maybe he just brought in an extra land and didn't replace it.
Like. Yeah.
No, there's still a Tranquil Domain. I think.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So he just has an extra land. Okay, I would have swapped 1 for 1, but I guess that's fine.
I think you still want those Ringleaders because, like, you know, when you have a Lackey, if you can put a Ringleader into play and just like refill your whole hand, like that's so powerful.
Yeah.
After Lackey, Ringleader's like your next best card. Like, obviously not in like terms of raw power, but I think like as a person who has played a lot of Legacy Goblins, which I know is not exactly the same thing, and just like has turned small red dude sideways quite a lot, like a 4-mana draw 3, like 2/2, is like the idea of a 4-mana red card. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's so good. It's I also like, man, every other creature type got so blown out in that cycle of cards that Ringleader is from.
The elf one, the Sylvan Messenger, has been played.
Yeah, but like, man, the Merfolk one, please. It's like a 1/2 for 4. It doesn't even have like an ability.
It probably is like Island Walk.
Oh man, I can't remember what it's called. I'd look it up right now.
I was to say I could pull it up, but I do not know the name of that one.
That's how bad it is, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and like, it's not even like Merfolk isn't a creature type that doesn't see play in like the bigger, older formats, right? Like, Merfolk is like a legit deck that people play all the time in older, non-rotating formats, just like Goblins is.
All right. So I'm looking at Ron's what he's boarded out. So he brought in 3 Swords Plowshare, Solitary Confinement, which we expected, and then he did bring in Warmth and Circle Protection Red.
Yeah.
I'm not as high on that Warmth. I can see the Circle Protection Red, but still, even then, like
I think the Warmth is a little bit better actually, but
all right. So he took out 2 Seal of Cleansing. What's that middle card?
hard to see from this angle.
Wait, he took out an Elephant Grass?
That's wild to me. Elephant Grass is like one of the best cards.
Well, I mean, it only stalls, but I mean, like it just seems better than.
Yeah, well, it's a 1-mana enchantment.
It seems better than Warmth.
Has a relative effect in this game. Like,
he took out a Sylvan Library to Saba's Web, and did he take out Parallax Wave? That one seems weird as well.
Saba's Web does nothing.
It keeps Rishadan Port and Wasteland tapped, but
I mean, that's not worth a card.
No, I mean it replaces itself but I want to see what the last card was.
I don't know. I can't tell from this angle. Either way, I think, you know, you can't feel bad when you get beat down by Goblins. Goblins is like the all-time good guy, and like sometimes they have turn 1 Lackey. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's especially like with the London Mulligan, it's a lot easier to get a turn 1 Lackey, and
yeah, for sure.
It's very powerful. It's something like, and it's hard in this format because you can't commit that many cards to dealing with like a 1-drop creature, and so
I mean. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, so like if you are playing to beat a turn 1 Lackey, you're probably putting yourself at a disadvantage for other decks.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you know, on paper, when you kind of just look at these 2 decks, they look like they're very different. But in reality, I think they're pretty similar in that, like, they're just a big pile of synergistic cards that really like lean pretty heavily on 1 or 2 cards to like, you know, assemble that engine. So, you know, we're talking about cards like Goblin Lackey and cards like Argothian Enchantress, and both decks are helped a lot by the London Mulligan. But the thing that the Goblin deck has going for it that I think gives it a slight edge in this matchup is that it has way more redundancy, because the way that it kills you is through the combat zone. So every piece of its quote unquote combo actually has a relevant impact on that, right? Like they all are creatures that turn sideways. And so even like on your worst lackey draws where you attack and put a Goblin Matron into play, like that's like a slow draw for me, but it's still very powerful. It's card advantage. It means you go get whatever the best goblin is for the situation that you're in. And it gets you like that much closer to killing your opponent. But both of these have that same decks have the same kind of feel where you put together a couple of real synergistic pieces and then snowball those effects on top of each other to like have some big powerful turn where you kill your opponent. I think like in this matchup, the goblins just have more redundancy, and their draws are always going to be a little bit less clunky. So I think probably if you had these guys play this match out 100 times, it would look pretty similar to what we just saw most of the time.
Yeah, I don't think anything like really out of the what was expected to happen. But I mean, like I do see the Enchantress deck like beating the Goblins deck a number of times. Like it seems like it has the tools and the speed. I guess it might almost depend on how aggressive you are to like get a swords, or if the Goblins deck just can't get a lackey. Because I think anytime the deck has a turn 1 lackey, then it's
got to be a favorite to win on any game where it plays a turn 1 lackey. So
if it's unanswered, so
especially on the play.
Yeah. So. All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. So we will see the Red Green's Goblin decks moving on. So if you guys haven't already filled out a bracket, we reset the brackets for the top 16, the Sweet 16 of this tournament, and you're able to recast your votes on predicting the winner. So even if you didn't make it for the 64 one, or if your bracket got busted, we're doing another one for the top 16 decks. So you can pick out your favorite who is going to take it down out of the top 16, and then you can boast some sweet bragging rights. I just filled out mine earlier today, and so
it's throw a link down in the description for us.
Yeah, I'll put it in the comments that people can fill it out. So fill it out. It's a cool way to kind of follow along and feel like you have a little bit of skin in the game. So it's a fun way to participate. All right. I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and hopefully we will see you soon with another match for this 64 deck gauntlet. But until then, I would like to thank Bob for coming on, and thank everyone for tuning in. And until next time, take care.
Take care. Be good.